fiction. Okay, so yes, I'm not actually like just playing Angry Birds on my phone. I'm going to read to you. So this is a scene in which, with Emma and Julian, and in this book they return to Ferry for a mission they've been sent on by the Clave. Okay. Emma and Julian had been walking for some hours when Emma realized that they were being followed. It had actually been a pretty pleasant walk along a tramped path in the woods. Julian was easy enough to talk to when she tried not to think about how he felt about her or about how he felt, period. They avoided the topics of Livy and the Parabati curse and talked instead about the Clave and what its next plans might be and how Zara might figure into them. Julian walked ahead holding the map, consulting it when enough light rayed down through the trees to make it readable. We could reach the Unseelie Court by tomorrow morning, he said, pausing in the middle of a clearing. Depending on how much we're willing to travel at night. Emma stopped in her tracks. We're being followed, she said. Julian stopped as well and turned to her, folding the map. You're sure? His voice was quiet. Emma strained to hear the tiny breakage of branches behind them, the thump of a footfall. She nodded. I'm sure. There was no doubt in Julian's eyes. Emma felt a faint gratification that even in his current state, Julian trusted her skills implicitly. We can't run, he said. He was right. The trail was too rocky. Come on. Emma grabbed Julian's hand. A moment later, they were skinning up the trunk of the tallest of the oak trees in the clearing. Emma found the fork of a branch and settled into it. Julian swung up across from her. They clung to the tree trunk and looked down. The footfalls were getting closer. Hoofbeats, Emma realized, and then a kelpie. Dark green with a mane of shimmering seaweed rose into the clearing, a rider on its back. Emma sucked in her breath. The rider was a man wearing Shadowhunter gear. She leaned down, eager to see more. Not a man, a boy, thin and narrow-faced with a shock of black hair. Dane Larkspur on a kelpie, Julian muttered. What is this? If I see Zara come riding up on the Loch Ness Monster, we're going home, Emma hissed back. The kelpie had stopped dead in the middle of the clearing. It was rolling its eyes, deep black with no whites. Closer up, it looked less like a horse, even though it had a mane and tail and 4 legs, and more like a frightening creature thing, something that had never meant to be out of water. Hurry up! Dane jerked on the kelpie's bridle, and a memory flickered back of Emma's mind. Something about how bridling a kelpie forced it to obey you. We need to find Emma and Julian before nightfall. The kelpie spoke. Emma jolted. I do not know those creatures, master. I do not know what they look like. It doesn't matter. Pick up their trail. Dane smacked the kelpie across the shoulder. Okay, I'll describe them for you. Julian's the kind of guy who'd have a girl as Parabati. Get it? No, said the kelpie. He spends all his time chasing little kids around. He has like 1 million children. It's really creepy. In my culture, it is men who bear children, said the kelpie. That's disgusting, said Dane. Now pay attention. Emma, she's the kind of girl who'd be hot if she ever shut up. I will kill him, Emma said. I will kill him while talking the whole time. I don't really understand human attitudes towards beauty, said the kelpie. I like seaweed on a woman. Shut up. Jane jerked the bridle, and the kelpie exposed its needle-like teeth in a hiss. We need to find them before the sun goes down. His smile was ugly. Once I get back with the black book, Zara will give me anything I want. Maybe one of Julian Blackthorne's sisters. I know, gross, right? Dane's horrible. Emma was out of the tree so fast the world was a blur of green leaves and red rage. She landed on Dane Larkspur and knocked him out of his saddle, forcing an oof of pain out of him when they hit the ground together. She punched him in the stomach, and he doubled up while she sprang to her feet. She grabbed for her sword. She would have been worried if Julian wouldn't have followed her, but he was already on the ground, yanking off the kelpie's bridle. My lord, the kelpie bowed its forelegs to Julian. Dane was coughing and gagging, rolling on the ground in pain. Thank you for freeing me. Don't mention it, Julian said. The kelpie straightened. May you find fortune, good luck, and many children. Thanks. Julian tossed the bridle aside. The kelpie dashed into the forest. Emma stood over Dane with her sword pointed at his throat. Lying flat on the ground, he glared at her. What are you doing here, Larkspur? We were sent to get the black book, not you. Sure, you were sent to get it. He turned his head and spit blood, and then I was supposed to get it from you. That's what I was sent to do. And you weren't supposed to notice you following us? You sounded like an elephant, a sexist elephant. You're a terrible shadow hunter, said Emma. No one asked you. Be quiet. Did the Inquisitor seriously tell you that if you got the book from us, you could have, I don't need to, like, Drew? She's 13. Dane just stared at her. What? Emma's voice dripped scorn. Am I talking too much? Emma suddenly realized Dane wasn't staring at her, but behind her. Julian had come up quietly and was standing with his longsword in his hand, looking at Dane with a frightening coldness. You do know, he said, that if you ever touch Drew, I'll kill you. Dan pushed himself up on his elbows. You'll be dead by then. Okay, so I mostly want to just talk to you guys. So I was going to ask for questions, and the first person who asks a question gets a prize. It has to be a serious question, not like a question like if, you know, the characters were all office supplies, what would they be? So you can pick whichever book you want here from of mine from the store, and I will sign it for you for free. So that's the prize, and go. Who's got a good question? Wave your arm if you got a really good question. Okay. There.
So in Lord of Shadows, when Mark, Julian, Christina, and Emma go to see the Unsteely King, and he gives him the riddle about the egg and stuff, and Mark says that he would see a rose with thorns. Is that referring to Christina and Kieran, or fairies and blackthorns?
That's a really good question. Hey, oh you.
Kieran, because there's a line after that says that Emma glances at Christina, and Christina's like a little baffled by it.
Yeah, no, he definitely, I mean, I think saying he sees roses is a definite reference to Christina. So the king is sort of asking them a personality riddle almost, like a Rorschach test, like what do you see in this picture? And so they all give a different answer that I think says something about them, and definitely I think his answer is about you could say it's about Christina and Kieran, you could say it's about Shadowhunters and fairies, but definitely I think there's a reference there to Christina and also to Kieran as well. So I think it's pretty clear what he's thinking about. Thinking about the love triangle he's currently embroiled in. And the king's like, I don't really care about your problems. Okay.
Okay.
Oh my god!
Okay, so these last 10 years must have been like really, really awesome for you.
Very busy.
Awesome for all of us.
Yeah, like, we adore you for this. Like what you brought to us is amazing, and we cannot help but love you. What has been your favorite part of like the last 10 years, and what's been the most special thing to you?
I mean, I think, wow. Okay. No, that's a really interesting question, and it's hard to pick one special thing. I think, you know, for me, it's like, because it's usually not one moment. It's sort of the realization of this dream that I had my whole life that I would be a writer. It's what I always wanted to do, and you know, when I was a little kid, it was what I wanted to do. When I got my first computer, which like now would be like, is basically like a plant pot, you know. That was what I did. I wrote all these books, and they were terrible, but I did it all, you know, like I wrote constantly and my whole life. And so I always thought, well, this is something I'm going to do for fun, but it's never going to be my job, because I thought that being a writer was just this incredibly unlikely thing that only very lucky people got to do. And I didn't understand how you would become a writer, and I didn't understand how you would, you know, get other people to like your stories, any of that. It all just seemed bizarre to me. I wrote for myself, and sometimes I showed it to my friends. And I think that the actual experience of having written a book and having it out there in the world and having other people read it was the most amazing thing. Like the moment City of Bones came out, I went to the bookstore with my friends, and we all just stood there and looked at it like this. I couldn't believe it was there and that it was on the bookshelf. So everything since then has also been amazing. Like I've been very lucky, the books that people did like the books, that they turned out to be popular enough for me to write more of them and create more characters that I love and share them with people. But I think just that first initial experience of being like, oh my God, my book is like out there and on the shelf is something you only get that one time. You know, every new book is exciting, but that one experience of being like, oh my God, my book is out. Even if nobody reads it but my Aunt Rose. Okay.
In Lord of Shadows, we see Jason Clary come to the LA Institute and visit Emma and Julian and meet Kit. They talk about their mission. Will we see more of that in the next book? And will we see more of Clary's answer to Jay's with the whole conversation? I love fighting, but like the cliffhanger is really killing me, and I'm just like, okay, I need to know.
That was a mean cliffhanger, I agree. And it was interesting because the first cliffhanger of the first book was that Jace wants to ask Clary to marry him and she starts to say no. And everyone was like, what? That's not even possible. How could she possibly say no? And I was like, no, genuinely, she's got a really good reason. And so we find out her reason in Lord of Shadows, and it's, I don't think a reason that anybody was expecting, but it ties in with their mission and sort of the whole overall story. I wanted to keep Jace and Clary in the story as part of the world and part of what was going on, even though the focus is not on them, the focus is on the Blackthorns, but they're still there, you know, and the fact that Emma and Julian have to go back to Fairy means that they do, it's very likely they're going to run into Jace and Clary because that's where Jace and Clary are. And in fact, as of the beginning of Queen of Air and Darkness, one of the issues is Jace and Clary were supposed to come back, but they haven't. So where are they? What happened? You know, and Emma, of course, knows what Clary told her, Clary told her that she believes she's going to die. And so Emma's like, is that what happened? Is that what came true? Is that why they haven't come back? So we've got to go to Fairy and figure out, you know, what happened to them. So the question of like, what happened to Jace and Clary? Where are they? How do their stories intersect with Emma and Julian's, and how do they, you know, what's going on with them, and the realization of what, you know, Clary's visions have meant all sort of ties into the bigger storyline. And yes, you will find out what happens with Jace and Clary's love life, though. You know, not immediately. Okay.
Oh, seriously?
Awesome. Okay. Another spoiler alert for people who've never read Lord of Shadows.
Sorry about it. We have a sort of 6-month rule in Shadowhunter world. Once the book's been out 6 months, we get to talk about it. So if you haven't read Lord of Shadows, you can go.
Okay. Is there like I've noticed that like since Jace, like in City of Glass, he was killed by Valentine with the mortal sword. And then Robert was also killed by the mortal sword, and then Livy as well with the shard. Is there like any significance you have with like having them die by it, like kind of saying that the mortal sword doesn't always protect the Shadowhunters kind of thing?
I mean, I think that it's an interesting question, because I think that the moment the mortal sword and the mortal instruments in general are a symbol of the Shadowhunters as they are now, which is that they're, I mean, we all know the Clave is super problematic. We put it that way. So I think it's simple that the fact that the mortal sword has been turned on Shadowhunters in a negative way is a sign of the fact that, of the way that the Clave is sort of turning Shadowhunters' own policies and things that are meant to protect them on them in a negative way. And now the shattering of the mortal sword, to me, you know, like when I first came up with it, I thought, I can't do that. I can't break the mortal sword. Like it didn't occur to me that you could break the mortal sword. I thought, no, it's, you know, it's impregnable. It's unbreakable. And then I was like, well, everything in the Shadowhunter world is sort of breaking down and collapsing inward, and I think shattering this sword and what happens with it afterwards is kind of a symbol of where they are. So how is the sword rebuilt, and what it means to rebuild that sword, and whether it stands in for, you know, rebuilding the Clave is sort of something we explore in Queen of Air and Darkness. Good question.
Thank you.
Out of all of your books, which character do you personally relate to the most?
I think personally I probably relate to Simon and Tessa the most. I think, you know, I love all the characters. Like, I love Emma. She's so sarcastic and badass, but I would know that I would not be that cool, you know, in those situations. And there are other characters that I love, but I know that their experience is really different from mine. Simon I relate to a lot because he's just a human, you know, at the beginning of the story. He doesn't have any special powers. He doesn't have any special knowledge. He's just dragged into this world because Clary, you know, his best friend, is dragged into this world. He's actually pretty immediately killed, and I'm like, that's what would happen to me. Like, it's a really dangerous world, and he's unprepared for it, and he's the guy who, the only thing he's got is that he's got grit and he's got bravery, you know, but he doesn't have any of those magical powers, and that's something that I relate to, not having any magical powers myself. With Tessa, I relate to her because I drew on a lot of my own experiences as a big reader to create her character. And so for me, Tessa processes everything that happens to her through the way that she loves books and the way that she loves characters. Like, even when she's in a terrible situation, she describes it to Will as, this is like when I'm reading a book and I know something awful is going to happen, I don't know how to stop it. And I'm like, well, that's me, because in my life, you know, books have been the most important thing, and I've always processed everything through how I feel about books and characters. So in that sense, those characters are the closest to me, but probably the characters the most fun to write is Magnus. Who was like not like me at all. is super, super fun. So.
Okay, I'm going to kind of go back to the beginning since
Sure.
it's the 10th anniversary.
Questions about anything are fine.
What I've always wondered is, how did Jace find Clary again in that Java Jones? Because
You know, I actually don't even remember. I know it's in there, and I actually think that he would be a pretty crappy shadow hunter if he couldn't find her. Like, he's got to be able to find her. But true, he didn't know who she was, and I believe that he goes back and he talks to Hodge about what he saw, and Hodge sends him after her. So I think there's some thing by which Hodge actually helps him figure out where she is. But I imagine he kind of went and lurked around her house like a creeper and then followed her. You ask me, because I don't think he like hung out in the coffee shop knowing she was going to show up. I think he followed her there. It's a little creepy, but you know, it's his job. Okay, well, you and then you. You don't have time to prepare yourself.
So, in Lord of Shadows, the Blackthorn family, when they get to go to the Lord Institute with Kit, and they run spoiler, the 6-month rule. They run into to be Lovelace, as a ghost. I was just wondering, is there any possibility that we can see anyone else? Please.
I know. I mean, yes. Okay, so Kit sees Jessamine in the New York Institute because Kit can see ghosts, and he does. He sees some other ghosts in Queen of Air and Darkness, but I think you can probably guess who they are. And I've never been really sure about bringing Will back as a ghost, because I think Will had a really happy life and he died happy. There's no reason for him to come back and hang around, because ghosts sort of are meant to be people who are lost something or are unhappy, have some unresolved business, and that's why they're there. But I think that Will, let me put it this way, I think Will would be able to come back if there was some kind of big magical thing that happened maybe in the future that reversed some of the laws of death and life. That's a very vague answer, so I'm glad you're excited. But we're not going to see him like a standard ghost, because, I mean, to me it's important as part of Will's character that he had a really great life, and he was really happy. And when he died, I think it was the best kind of death that anybody could have. So if he comes back, it's going to be in a different way. But that doesn't mean we'll never see him. And also, you're going to see him the last hours in which he's... I really have had a lot of fun writing him as a dad, because he's like the most annoying dad. Like, it's so fun writing him from his kid's point of view. I don't know, like, I'm sort of like, I have no idea how we're all going to, like, feel about this, because, you know, Will is, like, this sexy, brooding hero, and now he's, like, Lucy's dad, and she's like, I really hope my dad doesn't come in my room. Oh my god, he's in my room. Oh my god, he's so mad because I would have had a boy in my room. Oh, this is so embarrassing. Oh, he's going to make an embarrassing joke. Oh, he did. And I'm like, it's so funny seeing Will from this other perspective, so I'm enjoying it, so I hope you guys will enjoy it, too.
So in the Bane Chronicles, there's this mini chapter, this excerpt part where James, he's drunk and he's talking to Magnus, and he's like, my father believed that I was cursed, or he was cursed, but I believe that I'm damned. But does that have something to do with Grace or Cordelia? Because you said that him and Cordelia got married, but not for the reasons that you think, and I'm really conflicted right now.
James at that juncture that we're seeing him has been through a lot of bad stuff, and it doesn't actually specifically necessarily have to do with Cordelia and Grace, although that's a really complicated situation. It's a retelling of Great Expectations, and James is sort of Pip, and Grace is Estella. He meets her when he's really, really young, and she lives sort of next door to him in Idris, and they become really good friends, and then he just, he believes that he's in love with her. And whether he is really in love with her, whether it's just something he thinks, and how he feels about Cordelia, who initially in the book, he thinks of as just a friend, has no idea she likes him. It's a complicated situation, but I think even that kind of a complicated situation wouldn't make you think that you're damned. I mean, that seems a little excessive. So I think what's more what happens to James in the book is that he's always sort of suffered a certain amount of bullying and prejudice because his mother was a warlock and not a shadow hunter, and he has these powers, and he also looks a little bit different. He has these sort of like yellow eyes, he has this ability to turn into a shadow, and the general feeling of shadow hunters, as we know, is they're not that great with anybody who is different in any way. So James has experienced a lot of bullying, and then there's also, I can't tell you the plot of Last Hours, but there is stuff going on in London that's very bad, and James is getting the blame for these terrible things that he didn't do. Like murder level things. These are bad. And so James is feeling so the pain that James is experiencing in that section isn't really about his love life. It's really about the fact that he is being treated as if he is a monster. And so when that happens, you start to feel like maybe you are a monster, or you are unworthy, and that's what's going on with him.
Why does he use a gun?
Christopher invents a gun. It's an unusual kind of gun, and it's actually Christopher's gun, and he gave it to James, which was probably stupid, but it doesn't work the way normal guns work. And it's something that Christopher made for him because James can travel into the shadow realm. So you will see Christopher is an inventor. He, a little bit like Henry, he and Henry have kind of like a cute relationship, I think, because Henry's sons are not particularly interested in inventing, but Christopher does love it. And so this is one of the things that he invents, and he gives like the prototype gun to James. Okay. Jean jacket, yes.
Oh my gosh. Wait, what's that question? Wait,
I don't know.
In Infernal Devices, when Tessa meets the Dark Sisters, the carriage she's getting into says Pandemonium Club, which is also the club that Clary went to when she saw Jason Alec stab that guy.
Yes.
So will the Pandemonium Club ever come up again? And
I mean, thematically, so in mythology, Pandemonium is the capital of hell. It means all demons. And so there is a connection between the Pandemonium Club of the past in London and the Pandemonium Club as it exists in the future. I mean, it's one of those things that's like a small connection that connects the two different time periods. So you will hear about it a little bit more because there's also a mention of Pandemonium in The Last Hours, and I think that'll probably explain it. But it's a good question. I mean, there's a connection. It's a small one.
So I have an autistic family member, and I was just wondering what it was like for you to write an autistic character, like explore how that would affect his character and how he behaves.
I mean, Ty is based specifically on my stepbrother, who is autistic. And I had been asked by a lot of fans if I would write a neurodivergent shadow hunter and what, that would be like. And my first thought was my stepbrother, because he's the person I'm the most close to who is autistic. And so a lot of Ty's, I mean, for me, it was a lot of research, because obviously, autism is a spectrum and all autistic people are different. They share a common trait of having autism, but they are very different kinds of people, and they have very different characteristics. So for me, I went with a lot of things that are specific to my stepbrother, which is things like Ty is light sensitive and noise sensitive, but he isn't touch sensitive, and he isn't even a lot of autistic people are sensitive to the feelings of different kinds of cloth. Ty is not that way. But he also uses stimming toys and things like that to focus his mind and relax him. He responds well to pressure. There's that scene where Kit hugs him on the roof, and that's something that my stepbrother always responded, and still does, though he is now in his 20s, but has always responded very well to, which is when he would be melting down, having somebody hug him really tightly was helpful. So I tried to, also my stepbrother always loved animals. I carried that over to Ty, and that's common, but not, applicable to all autistic people, but many love animals, and my stepbrother is now a vet. So I see a lot of, obviously carried a lot of those characteristics over, but no character maps exactly onto a person. Ty's a shadow hunter, so I had to think, how is this going to affect him as a shadow hunter? How is this going to make him different as a shadow hunter, and I think that we see that he's still a really great shadow hunter, and that he actually brings a slightly different way of shadow hunting and a way of thinking about that stuff to the table that allows them to solve problems they wouldn't be able to otherwise. So even though there's the scene in where they go to the shadow market in Lord of Shadows, and he is affected by how noisy and loud and chaotic it is. And that is something that's specific to him having autism. But I think also there is also scenes where he is able to interpret and think about things differently. Like he solves the mystery of how did Malcolm and Annabelle communicate. They communicated through this raven. Because he thinks about it differently than everybody else does. He thinks about it in a specific sort of focused way, and he solves that mystery. And without Ty, I don't think that they would have gotten that answer. So I think for me it was important to make Ty, mostly just to make him seem like a real person, and one who is autistic and whose autism affects his shadow hunting, but not in any kind of negative way. Like, he makes his, unique and special contributions, and I don't think that they would be as strong as they are without him. I think over there. Yeah.
Obviously is really new to this situation and to the situation with Ty towards the end of Lord of the Shadows with Libby. And they're obviously sort of becoming pretty close to Lord of the Shadows. Are we possibly witnessing a new set of affair with Ty?
I don't think it will be a good idea for them to be parabatai. I think maybe I should leave it there. Well, okay, let me put it this way. Ty and Kit's relationship is super important. It's a huge focus of The Wicked Powers, which is the series that comes after. We definitely learn more about their relationship in Queen of Air and Darkness. They do get closer, but Ty is also in a super, super bad place. He lost his twin sister, and that is a life-changing kind of event. And so he's going to be different because of that. And so there's a lot of Kit trying to be there for him in the right way and trying to figure out what the right way is. And Ty also having this incredible difficulty in dealing with the idea that his sister might be gone. So I think that we're going to, for those who are interested in what happens with Kit and Ty, we're not going to see them either. We're not going to see their way that their relationship pans out completely in Queen of Air and Darkness, because their relationship is a big, big focus of Wicked Powers. Let me put it that way. That help?
Picture.
In Lord of Shadows, when Drew touches the family artifact left by Diego's brother, and she sees that person in the very rope, is it like Sebastian's child, like cursed child, Voldemort child?
The cursed child. Wait, is the cursed child Voldemort's child? Actually, now read the cursed child, so I have no idea who the cursed child is.
It is.
It is?
Yeah.
Voldemort had a kid? Who would
Yeah. How do
do that with Voldemort? I guess he was hot when he was Tom Riddle. All right, all right. This seems tangential. I should read it. Okay, so yeah, when Drew touches an artifact that Jaime has in his bag, and it takes her to Fairy. And so in Fairy she sees a boy who is about her age, a little bit younger. And who that boy is obviously a matter of much speculation, and all I can tell you is that you definitely find out in Queen of Air and Darkness who he is. We're going to see him again, and we'll have his whole background explained. And he's definitely, his name's Ash. Ash is pretty important to the plot. And many people have guessed different ideas of who he might be. We'll see. I can tell you now. No, I mean, definitely not. No, I did not think. When the City of Glass was published, I was thinking about writing Infernal Devices because it was my next project, and I was super excited about it. But I think that you never think like that's kind of stuff is going to happen. Like you're hoping that you can keep writing. The books will be successful enough that you can keep writing them. And that's pretty much all that you do hope for, because this other stuff that sort of lands on you, like making a movie, making a TV show, that kind of thing, you have no control over. So whether that happens, you can't choose it. So I think that I try to kind of put it aside as much as possible and not think about it, because, you don't want to drive yourself, out of your mind by spending all of your time thinking, well, if only this would happen, or if only that would happen, or, if only they would, make a film, then, because you have no way of making that happen. And I think I was surprised even during the entire, filming process. I would go up to the set and wander around and be like, this is so weird. This is like a big joke that's being played on me. It's not really happening. So yeah, no, it's always surprising.
What is your favorite book that you haven't written from another author? You said you've been reading all your life, and I heard you mention Great Expectations. What do you think your favorite book would be?
Probably my favorite book, and I'm sure this is many people's favorite book, is Pride and Prejudice. Yeah. I read it when I'm too young to actually really even understand it, and I loved it anyway, which I think speaks to how well written it is, because I loved Lizzie so much. And then
Mine too.
Yeah, and then when I reread it when I was a little older, I loved Mr. Darcy. When I was younger, I was like, Mr. Darcy, take him or leave him. I love Lizzie. She's so great. She's so brave. She's so smart. She's so awesome. Later, I loved them both, and I can always reread it. I reread it every year. I can always reread it and find something new in it, and some new, nuanced piece of characterization. It fits together perfectly like a puzzle.
I think Lizzie and Emma Carstairs have a lot in common.
Well, that's a very wonderful compliment. Thank you. Emma would also be delighted, because Lizzie is literally one of my favorite fictional heroines, and she's so smart and so strong. And I just think that the writing of it, it amazes me that Jane Austen wrote this book. Her family didn't really think of her writing as something important or significant. They gave her the corner of the living room to write in, and she wrote sitting on one chair with her feet up on another chair, while people were passing in and out of the living room. It amazes me that she created this incredible work of art, and so I always try to think of that as, an inspiring thing. When I'm stuck, I'm like, well, Jane Austen managed to do this in the corner of her living room while her family was living their lives, so I can do this. And I think it's just always, it's a great lesson in the way that, to me, one of the most important thing I think that I've ever learned about writing is that it's the characters that matter. You can create, plot comes from characters, and what we care about, what we love when we read books, I think, is the characters we're reading about and the chance to be with them and spend time with them. And the plot comes from the choices that they make. And so there's a moment where Diana is talking in Lord of Shadows, and she says the choices we make us. And that was a sort of something that I had been thinking about characters and the way that they affect the books that they're in, because I was like, the characters and the choices they make the story. And that was something I definitely learned from reading Pride and Prejudice. No? Good question. Okay, do we have time for more?
Maybe like 3 more.
3 more? Okay. Okay, there. Yeah.
Will we see any Mark or Kieran relationship?
Poor Mark, he's torn between 2 different people. Yeah, definitely. But Kieran comes back. He's in the Scholomance at the very beginning of Queen of Air and Darkness, but he doesn't stay there too long. He returns to Mark and Christina, and so we're going to see both Mark with Christina and also Mark with Kieran. I can't tell you who he ends up with, just that we're going to see both relationships. I know, I love me a love triangle. I told myself I wasn't going to do a love triangle with the main characters, and I didn't. And then I did another one with the other characters. But yeah, I love Mark and Kieran and Christina, so it's a lot of fun. Okay, let's go quickly. Okay, there.
Okay, so in the book there's a lot of dynamic struggles between downloaders and downloaders. And there's just in every book there's kind of I don't want to say lower class, but there's always a good versus evil thing. And especially since you mentioned that everything is kind of collapsing in the shadow world, do you take inspiration from real life events and what's going on in the world and the racial struggles and other things and kind of incorporate them into the book?
I mean, I think definitely, and especially I think with the way things have been politically recently, I think inventing the cohort was a big response to that. The cohort is a group that sort of thrives on nationalism and xenophobia and othering other people and using that as a way to kind of consolidate their power. And sort of Zara and her horrible father. I know, Zara is like one of those characters that like, I can find literally nothing redeeming about her. And I've been pleased to see that none of my readers have found anything redeeming about her either. Nobody ever writes to me and is like, Zara, I'd like to see more of her and maybe she's not so bad. They're like, oh, hate her. She's awful, her father is awful. And I think that in Queen of Air and Darkness we're gonna, it's the fact of Robert's death leaves this political vacuum, and Horace moves into that political vacuum. So he's going to be our next Inquisitor. And once we have a member of the cohort in a position of such enormous power, we start to see the kind of laws they pass and the way that they start to change the Shadowhunter world. And I think that that is very reflective of what we're seeing sort of all over the world in politics right now. So yeah, it's been kind of hard to write, but it's also cathartic in a way because I get to get my anger out. Okay, I'll do two more. So, there.
How did you create your pen name, Cassandra Clare?
Oh, Cassandra Clare. Cassandra was the name of Jane Austen's sister, and when she was young, the first book she wrote was called The Beautiful Cassandra, and it was about her sister. And her sister was the person she always showed her books to first. So I picked Cassandra from that. Clare is the county in Ireland that my grandmother was from. Oh, what a good name! Excellent. Okay, one more. So, okay, I didn't really pick anybody from over here. So there.
So in Shadowhunters Academy,
Mm-hmm.
we saw a lot of the building of Simon and Isabel's relationship, and they're obviously
Susie.
married.
Mm-hmm.
So in the next books, do we see more of their relationship and of Magnus and Alec and all the relationships?
Yeah, because I feel like, we got to see Jason Clary, and we saw a lot of Magnus and Alec in Lord of Shadows. So actually we're going to see more of Simon and Isabel in Queen of Air and Darkness. So they are definitely, they weren't in the first two books, they are definitely in this book. And I don't know, I feel like anything about them is pretty spoilery, but obviously they have a pretty important funeral to attend, so they come to Idris. And so in doing so, they meet with our main characters and and also they're very worried about Jason Clary. They're the ones who actually pass on the news that they haven't come back at the time they were supposed to come back. And with all the chaos that's going on in Idris, nobody else has really noticed or cared, but Jason Clary's obviously their friends and loved ones are worried, but so they're they're the ones who kind of come with the news of they haven't come back, they were supposed to come back. So, and we do see more of Simon and Isabel in their relationship, which is doing well. I mean, they're going to get married, everything's good with them, so. Susie and Malik are doing good. All right, thank you guys so much. I appreciate all the questions. And I guess we're going to start the signing, so if you have any questions you didn't get to ask, you can ask me when you come up.